It started with a flicker on a screen, just a tiny odd blip in the data streaming into a deep space observatory, way out in the Chilean desert. At first, nobody paid much attention. Space is full of weird signals, cosmic rays, solar flares, old satellites tumbling end over end. But this one didn't move like anything human-made. It didn't orbit. It didn't spin. It just drifted, slowly, deliberately. And there wasn't just one. It was a whole group of them, clustered together like a school of silent fish in the endless dark. Over the next few days, astronomers across the globe began comparing notes. Telescopes in Hawaii, South Africa, and even backyard setups run by amateur stargazers all pointed toward the same patch of sky beyond Neptune. The objects were huge, some as big as cities, and their surfaces absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making them nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. No engines fired, no radio chatter, just cold, quiet metal coasting through the void. Panic didn't hit right away. That came later. At first, it was curiosity. Sharp, electric, the kind that makes scientists stay up all night double-checking their math. But when the world's top signal analysts ran the data through every filter they had, something unexpected popped up. A repeating pattern buried in the static. Not random noise, not a natural phenomenon. A signal, clean, precise, built on prime numbers and geometric sequences, the universal language of intelligence. Within 48 hours, a team at a university in Europe cracked the basic structure. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a cry for help. We are adrift, the message said, in the only way it could, through pulses of light and math. Systems failing. No weapons. No aggression. Seeking aid. That changed everything. News spread fast. Too fast, social media exploded. Some people joked it was a Netflix promo. Others swore it was a government hoax. But as more observatories confirmed the fleet's trajectory, slowly, steadily drifting inward toward the solar system, the joke stopped. Governments went quiet. Emergency meetings were called behind closed doors. Military satellites were quietly repositioned, not to attack, but to watch. Just in case. But something surprising happened next. Instead of fear taking over, a different feeling started to grow, especially among engineers, doctors, pilots, and everyday people who'd spent their lives fixing things, helping others, or just wondering if we're alone out there. If these beings were truly stranded, lost and running out of time, weren't they just like us? Weren't they travelers far from home, hoping someone would notice they were in trouble? The United Nations held an emergency session that lasted 3 days. Arguments flared. Some nations wanted to shut down all communication, build defenses, assume the worst. But others pushed back hard. If we meet our first neighbors in the universe with guns raised, one delegate said, what does that say about us? Slowly, carefully, a fragile agreement formed. No weapons, no threats, just observation and preparation. Behind the scenes, space agencies that had once competed fiercely, NASA, the European Space Agency, China's CNSA, even private companies that usually cared more about profit than poetry, started sharing data like never before. Engineers sketched out ideas on napkins and whiteboards. How to dock with an alien ship when you don't know its shape, its atmosphere, or even which end is the front. Medical teams studied biology textbooks from every corner of Earth, trying to imagine what kind of life support a non-human species might need. Could they breathe oxygen? Did they eat? Did they even have mouths? Nobody knew, but they were willing to try. Meanwhile, the fleet kept coming. Not fast, nothing in space moves fast by human standards, but steady. Like a tired caravan finally seeing lights in the distance after crossing a desert with no end. Scientists estimated it would take months before the closest ship reached the asteroid belt. But every day brought it a little nearer, and with each passing orbit the world watched, held its breath and waited. What made it real wasn't the size of the ships or the strangeness of the signal. It was the silence that followed. No demands, no ultimatums. Just that quiet, repeating pulse. We are here. We are broken. Will you help? And for the first time in human history, the answer wasn't about who had the biggest rockets or the strongest borders. It was about who had the biggest heart. People started doing small things. A retired mechanic in Ohio built a scale model of a possible docking arm using scrap metal and posted the design online for free. A group of students in Kenya coded a translation algorithm that turned human emotions into light patterns, hoping it might bridge the gap if words failed. In Tokyo, a baker started selling star bread, shaped like distant galaxies, with proceeds going to fund open-source space rescue research. It wasn't organized. It wasn't official, but it was human. And as the first supply mission, dubbed Lifeline 1, was quietly assembled in a hangar in Florida, packed with water recyclers, spare power cells, and containers of nutrient gel designed to be safe for almost any carbon-based life form, the crew didn't feel like soldiers or explorers. They felt like neighbors showing up with soup when someone's sick. No one knew if the aliens would understand the gesture. No one knew if they'd even accept help. But that wasn't the point. The point was showing up, trying, reaching out across the unimaginable distance, not with fear but with open hands. Back on Earth, kids stopped asking if aliens were real. Now they asked, are they okay? Parents didn't just talk about hiding in bunkers, they talked about sharing. Teachers used the event to explain cooperation, physics, and empathy all in the same lesson. Even the news, usually full of shouting and division, softened its tone. For a few rare weeks, the whole planet wasn't split into countries or parties or teams. It was just Earth. One world looking up together. And out there in the cold between the planets, the silent fleet drifted closer, carrying thousands of lives, stories, and hopes no human had ever imagined. But now, for the first time, they weren't alone. Someone was coming to help. The day the rescue ships launched, the sky didn't crack open with thunder or fanfare. There were no speeches broadcast to every corner of the planet. Just a quiet hum of engines lifting off from 3 different launch sites: Florida, French Guiana, and the Gobi Desert, each carrying cargo that wasn't meant for war, but for care, water, power, air filters, medical supplies, and something even more precious: trust. Inside the lead vessel, a modified deep space tug retrofitted with universal docking clamps and soft light communication panels, the crew didn't feel like heroes. They felt nervous, human. Their hands shook a little as they ran final checks, not because they were afraid of the unknown, but because they knew the weight of what they carried. One wrong move, one misunderstood signal, and everything could fall apart. But they went anyway. It took weeks to reach the outer edge of the asteroid belt, where the alien fleet had slowed to a near stop. As the human ships closed in, the scale of what they were seeing finally hit home. These weren't sleek sci-fi cruisers from old movies. They were battered ancient things. Hull plates warped by centuries of cosmic radiation, solar sails torn like old cloth, docking ports crusted with ice and debris. Some ships listed sideways, held together by what looked like emergency patches made of woven metal and resin. It was clear. This fleet hadn't just broken down. It had been surviving barely for a very long time. Then came the first real contact. Through high-resolution cameras, the crew saw movement near one of the larger vessels, a slow opening of an airlock, not aggressive but cautious. A shape emerged, floating gently in zero gravity. It wasn't monstrous or terrifying. It was thin, tall, with limbs that bent in ways human joints couldn't, covered in a smooth, grayish skin that shimmered faintly under sunlight. It held up what looked like a tool but not a weapon. More like a scanner. It pulsed with soft blue light. The human pilot didn't reach for controls, didn't arm anything. Instead, they activated the ship's external lights in a slow, rhythmic blink, the same prime number pattern the aliens had used in their distress call. A few seconds passed. Then, from the alien side, the blue light responded in kind. Not identical, but close enough, an echo. A handshake across the void. That moment changed everything. Back on Earth, mission control held its breath. Then cheers broke out. Not wild, chaotic ones, but quiet, tearful sounds of relief. They'd been heard. They'd been understood. Over the next few days, the real work began. Human engineers sent over schematics of their docking systems using shared math and simple animations. The aliens responded with their own diagrams. Strange at first, but logical once you saw the patterns. Slowly, carefully, a connection was made. Not just mechanical, but human. Or rather, living being to living being. When the first supply pod latched onto the alien ship, it wasn't with a clang or a hiss, but a soft magnetic seal. Inside, the nutrient-paced water recyclers and oxygen cartridges were accepted without hesitation. Later scans showed the aliens distributing the supplies among their ships. Some of them, especially the younger ones, hovered near the observation ports watching the human vessels with what could only be described as wonder. People on Earth saw those images too. Not clear photos, just grainy thermal outlines, but enough to stir something deep inside. These weren't invaders. They were families, elders, children, just like us, but from somewhere impossibly far away. The world's scientists worked around the clock, not to dissect or dominate, but to understand. Linguists teamed up with AI researchers to build a real-time translation layer, not for complex philosophy, but for basics and hungry and cold and thank you, safe. Doctors studied the aliens' biology through non-invasive scans, learning that while their chemistry was different, based on silicon traces and ammonia-rich blood, they still needed warmth, clean air, and community to survive. And then came the moment no one expected. One evening, as the human ship floated beside the lead alien vessel, a soft melody began to play from the alien side, not through radio, not through speakers, but through vibrations in the hull itself, resonating like a giant gentle drum. It was haunting, slow, full of rises and falls that felt like longing. Someone on the human crew recorded it and sent it back to Earth. Within hours, musicians around the world began playing along, on pianos, flutes, even homemade instruments. They didn't know the meaning, but they felt it, and they answered with their own songs of hope, of home, of not being alone. That night, for the first time, two species shared music across the stars, not as a performance, but as a conversation. Governments, which had been tense and cautious, began to relax. Public opinion shifted hard. Donations poured in, not just money, but ideas. A farmer in Iowa suggested using algae-based oxygen systems that could work in low gravity. A retired teacher in Mumbai wrote a children's book about the travelers from the quiet stars, which went viral. Schools held Help the Fleet days, where kids built model rescue drones out of cardboard and dreamed up ways to share Earth's resources fairly. Of course, not everyone was on board. Some voices online screamed about risk, about contamination, about putting Earth last. But those voices grew quieter as more footage came in. Images of alien hands gently accepting a water container, of their ships lighting up in gratitude with soft pulses of color, of their elders bowing slowly toward the human vessels in a gesture that needed no translation. The mission wasn't perfect. There were glitches, a misaligned docking arm, a power surge that briefly cut comms, a moment of panic when an alien child drifted too far during a transfer. But each time, both sides paused, listened, adjusted, no blame, just problem-solving together. And through it all, the humans on the rescue ships kept journals. Not official logs, but personal notes. One wrote, "They don't look like us. They don't move like us. But when they saw our Earth through our camera feed, oceans, forests, cities at night, they made a sound. Like a sigh, like they recognized something beautiful." Another scribbled, "Today, one of them showed me how they grow food, inside glowing crystals that hum. I showed them a photo of my dog. They tilted their head for a full minute. Then they touched the screen gently. I think they understood." Back home, people weren't just watching a rescue. They were witnessing the birth of something new, a relationship built not on power but on patience. Not on fear, but on the simple, radical act of showing up when someone's in trouble. And as the first joint repair mission began, humans and aliens working side by side to fix a failing reactor on one of the smaller ships, it became clear. This wasn't just about saving a fleet. It was about remembering what it means to be alive in a universe that's vast, cold, and full of strangers, until you decide to reach out your hand. As the weeks turned into months, something quiet but powerful began to grow between the two species. Not just cooperation, but connection. The early days of cautious signals and careful handovers gave way to something more like routine, even friendship. Human crews and the alien travelers, now known to most as the Velan, a word they used to describe themselves in their own tongue, started sharing more than just supplies. They shared stories in their own ways. The Velan didn't speak like humans. Their language came through light pulses, subtle shifts in skin color, and low-frequency hums that vibrated through the hulls of their ships. But with time, and with the help of ever-improving translation software built from shared patterns, Humans began to understand not just what the Velan needed, but who they were. They learned the fleet had been traveling for over 300 years, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Their home star had grown unstable, swelling into a red giant that swallowed their inner worlds. They'd left everything behind, cities, forests, oceans, and packed their entire civilization into these great arcs, hoping to find a new place among the stars. But deep in interstellar space, they'd been caught in the gravity well of a rogue black hole, invisible and silent. The encounter tore their navigation systems apart and damaged their main engines beyond repair. Since then, they'd been drifting, slowly using up their last reserves, watching their children grow up in metal corridors with no sky above them. When that story reached Earth, it didn't just move scientists, it moved everyone. Parents held their kids a little tighter. Teachers used the Velan's journey to talk about courage, loss, and hope. Artists painted murals of starships shaped like seeds, floating toward a blue-green planet. People began to see the Velan not as aliens, but as refugees, just like so many humans throughout history who'd fled disaster with nothing but what they could carry, and Earth responded in kind. Hospitals repurposed old bioreactors to grow nutrient gels tailored to Velan biology. Engineers designed foldable solar arrays that could be attached to the outer hulls of their ships, giving them a steady source of power without needing complex repairs. Even fashion designers got involved, creating soft, flexible suits that Velan could wear if they ever needed to step into human habitats. Lightweight, temperature-controlled, and lined with gentle sensors to monitor their health. But the real magic happened in the small moments. During a routine supply transfer, a human engineer noticed one of the younger Velan staring at a photo stuck to the inside of a cargo container. A picture of a beach at sunset, waves rolling in, golden light on the sand. The Velan reached out, not touching the photo but hovering their hand near it, their skin rippling with soft blues and purples. Later, that same engineer sent a message back to Mission Control. Ask someone to send more Earth images. Not just cities. Show them trees, rain, mountains. They've never seen any of it. Within days, a digital archive called Earth for the Velan went live, curated by ordinary people from every continent. A fisherman in Indonesia sent video of dolphins leaping beside his boat. A grandmother in Peru recorded the sound of wind through the Andes. A teenager in Norway filmed the northern lights dancing over a frozen lake. These weren't grand gestures. They were gifts, tiny windows into a world the Velan might never walk on but could now imagine. In return, the Velan began sharing their own world. Through holographic projections, they showed humans what their home planet looked like. Vast crystalline forests that sang in the wind, rivers of liquid methane that glowed under twin moons, cities built inside living rock that grew slowly over centuries. They played recordings of their music, not just the haunting hums, but full symphonies made from magnetic fields and light refractions. Humans listened, mesmerized, realizing that beauty wasn't something unique to Earth. It was universal. Schools started Velan Days, where kids learned basic light signals and drew pictures to send into space. One class in rural Kenya built a model of a joint human Velan habitat using clay and wire, and mailed it to Mission Control with a note. We made room for everyone. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Misunderstandings happened. Once, a human drone accidentally startled a group of Velan elders by moving too fast near a sacred chamber. Another time, a batch of nutrient paste caused mild discomfort because the pH balance was slightly off. But each time, both sides paused, apologized in their own way, and worked to fix it. There was no blame, only care. And then came the day the Velan asked for something unexpected. Through their translator, they sent a simple request. Can we see Earth? With our own eyes? Not land on it, not even orbit too close. Just see it, from a distance. So Mission Control arranged it. A human ship gently guided one of the smaller Velan vessels into a stable orbit near the moon. There, for the first time, the Velan saw Earth, not as data or pixels, but as a living world hanging in the blackness. Swirling clouds, deep blue oceans, the green and brown patchwork of continents. Silence filled the comms for nearly a full minute. Then their ship lit up, not with alarms, but with a slow, pulsing wave of warm gold light, rippling from bow to stern. It was their way of crying, of saying thank you, of feeling awe. Back on Earth, millions watched the live feed. No one spoke. No one needed to. In that moment, the planet felt smaller and the universe felt kinder. People began to change how they talked. Not us and them, but we. We're helping them. We're learning from them. We're not alone. And as engineers and Valen technicians worked side by side to rebuild a damaged life support module, laughing in their own ways over a stubborn bolt that wouldn't turn, it became clear this wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was the beginning of something new, a shared future built not on technology or treaties, but on the simple, human and Valen truth that when someone is hurting, you don't look away. You show up, you listen, you help, and sometimes in doing so you find you've been saved too. Not everyone was happy about what was happening out there in space. As the bond between humans and the Valen grew stronger, cracks began to show back on Earth. At first, it was just grumbling. Online comments, late-night talk shows, worried parents asking if we were being too trusting. But soon the doubts turned louder, sharper. Some governments started pulling back funding. A few countries even froze their contributions to the joint mission, saying Earth had its own problems to fix. Rising seas, food shortages, wars that never seemed to end. Why are we feeding strangers in space, one politician asked on live television, when our own people are going hungry? The question stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Earth was struggling, but what those voices missed was that helping the Valen wasn't taking away from humanity. It was reminding people what humanity could be. Still, the tension grew. Protests popped up outside space agency offices. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. The Valen were spies, they said. Or their ships carried invisible diseases. Or this whole thing was a distraction while powerful groups planned something secret. One night, a small group tried to sabotage a launch facility in Central Asia, damaging a fuel line meant for a resupply mission. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Not everyone believed in this fragile new friendship. For the crews working in orbit, the news hit hard. They'd spent months building trust with the Valen, sharing meals, or what passed for meals, fixing systems together, even learning each other's quiet ways of saying good morning. Now, they were being told that back home, people saw their work as a risk, not a gift. But then something unexpected happened. When word of the sabotage attempt reached the Valen, they didn't retreat. They didn't shut down communication. Instead, they sent a message, not through translators, but through action. They opened every one of their ship logs to human scientists, every medical record, every navigation chart. They showed without being asked that they carried no weapons, no hidden agendas, no harmful tech. It was the ultimate act of trust. Look inside us. See for yourself. That gesture moved people more than any speech ever could. Around the world, ordinary citizens pushed back against the fear. Farmers organized food drives and said, "If we can share with our neighbors, we can share with the stars." Students held vigils outside government buildings, holding signs that read, "Kindness has no borders and they're just like us." Even former critics began to soften when they saw footage of Valen children, curious, gentle, playing with floating light orbs inside their ships, just like human kids playing with bubbles. But the real test came during a routine repair mission near the largest Valen vessel. A human maintenance drone, old and slightly glitchy, was sent to help replace a damaged coolant valve inside one of the alien reactors. Everything seemed fine, until a software error caused the drone to jerk suddenly, knocking loose a fragile energy conduit. There was a flash, a hiss of escaping gas, and then silence. Radiation alarms blared on both ships. 3 Valen engineers who had been working nearby were caught in the leak. By the time human medics reached them, it was too late. They didn't survive. Grief hit both sides like a wave. The human crew was devastated. They blamed themselves. Mission control went quiet for hours. Back on Earth, news channels showed the somber faces of engineers removing their caps in mourning. For the first time, this wasn't just about helping strangers. It was about losing friends. But what happened next surprised everyone. Instead of anger, the Valen responded with grace. Through their translator, they sent a simple message. Mistakes happen. You tried to help. That is what matters. Then they did something even more powerful. They held a ceremony. Not in secret, but broadcast openly to Earth. Their entire fleet dimmed its lights, except for a single soft pulse that moved from ship to ship, like a heartbeat passing through a family. At the same time, they played a sound, a low, resonant tone that vibrated through space, meant to honor those lost. It wasn't sad in the way humans think of sadness. It was peaceful, accepting, full of love. And Earth listened. In cities and villages, people stopped what they were doing. Some cried. Others stood in silence. A musician in Brazil recorded the Velan tone and wove it into a piano piece that went viral overnight. Schools held moments of reflection. Even the harshest critics fell quiet. That shared grief became a turning point. It proved that this wasn't a one-sided rescue. It was a real relationship with joy, yes, but also pain. And in facing that pain together, humans and Velan became something more than allies. They became companions on the same long journey through the dark. After that, cooperation deepened. Engineers redesigned all drones with double safety protocols. Medical teams created emergency response plans that included Velan physiology. And more importantly, people on Earth started talking differently. Not about them, but about us. As in, all of us. A young girl in the Philippines wrote a letter that ended up in mission control. If they lost people helping us help them, then we have to keep going. For them. For us. Her words were printed and taped to the wall of the command center. Slowly the fear faded. Not because the risks disappeared, but because something stronger took its place. Shared purpose. People realized that helping the Velan wasn't a distraction from Earth's problems. It was a reminder that those problems could be solved the same way, with patience, honesty, and care, and out in space as the two species worked side by side to repair the damaged reactor, this time with extra caution, extra communication, extra kindness. They weren't just fixing a machine. They were healing something deeper. A wound caused by suspicion, a silence broken by trust. Because in the end, it wasn't about perfect systems or flawless plans. It was about showing up even when you're scared. It was about saying, I'm sorry, and thank you, and we're in this together. Even if you say it in light pulses or hand signals or tears. And that, more than any technology, was what kept hope alive. After more than a year of shared work, shared meals, and shared silence under the stars, the day finally came when the Velan fleet no longer needed to drift. Their main engines, patched with human-made parts powered by repurposed solar arrays and guided by navigation software co-designed by both species, hummed to life for the first time in decades. Not with a roar, but with a steady, quiet vibration that traveled through every ship like a sigh of relief. But instead of turning away from Earth and vanishing into the deep black, the Velan did something no one expected. They asked to stay nearby, not on Earth. That was never the plan, and both sides understood why. Too many unknowns, too much risk of contamination, too great a strain on a planet already stretched thin. But Mars was different. Cold, quiet, mostly empty. A place where they could rebuild without asking for more than space and peace. And they didn't just ask. They offered something in return. In a final data transfer larger than any before, the Velan shared everything they had. Star maps stretching thousands of light years beyond what human telescopes could see. Records of ancient cosmic events. Biological archives of plants and organisms from their homeworld. All safely digitized, no physical samples. And even designs for energy systems that used starlight in ways humans had never imagined. It wasn't payment. It was partnership. A gift wrapped in trust. The United Nations debated for days, but this time the decision came faster. There was no shouting, no last-minute vetoes. Just a quiet consensus. If they want to build a new home near ours, and they're willing to share what they know, then we welcome them not as guests but as neighbors. And so, a new mission was born, not Lifeline anymore but Horizon. Human and Velan engineers began designing the first joint outpost on Mars together. Not separate bases but one shared settlement. Built in a sheltered canyon where solar winds were gentler and underground ice could be tapped for water. Humans would bring construction drones and habitat modules. The Velan would contribute self-healing building materials that grew like coral, and lighting systems that mimicked natural daylight cycles. It wouldn't be ready for years, maybe decades. But the foundation was being laid, not just in rock and metal, but in mutual respect. Back on Earth, life began to change in quiet, lasting ways. Kids who'd grown up watching the Veylan ships on the news now dreamed of becoming xenolinguists or interstellar medics. Universities added new courses on cross-species ethics and cooperative engineering. Even the way people talked about the future shifted from, "What can we take?" to "What can we build together?" The farewell wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches broadcast across the planet. Just a slow, graceful movement as the Veylan fleet, now repaired, powered, and full of hope, began its journey toward Mars, escorted by 3 human vessels like friends walking someone home. As they passed the moon, the Veylan ships pulsed a soft, golden light in a pattern humans had come to recognize. It meant thank you, goodbye, and we'll see you soon, all at once. People gathered on rooftops, beaches, and hilltops just to watch the sky, even though the ships were too far to see with the naked eye. They knew they were witnessing something rare, not an end, but a beginning. The first true step into a universe that wasn't lonely anymore. In the months that followed, life didn't magically fix itself on Earth. Storms still raged. Conflicts still simmered. But something had shifted in the air. People were kinder just a little. More willing to listen, more ready to share. The story of the stranded fleet became a quiet reminder that help doesn't have to come from someone like you to be real. That compassion doesn't need a common language. It just needs a willing heart. Schools taught the Veylan story not as science fiction, but as history. Museums displayed replicas of the first docking clamps, the nutrient paste containers, the handmade Earth photos sent into space. And every year on the anniversary of first contact, cities around the world dimmed their lights for 1 minute, not in mourning, but in solidarity. A moment of shared stillness, looking up, remembering that we reached out. And someone reached back. The Veylan never asked for much, just a chance. And in giving them that, humanity found something it didn't know it had lost, a sense of purpose that stretched beyond borders, beyond species, beyond fear. Now, when children ask, "Are we alone?" the answer isn't a guess or a hope. It's a fact. We're not alone, and more importantly, we don't have to be afraid of not being alone, because the greatest discovery wasn't their ships, or their technology, or even their strange, beautiful music. It was the simple truth that kindness travels farther than any signal, faster than any engine, and lasts longer than any empire. And as the red dot of Mars glowed a little brighter in the night sky, now home to more than just robots and dreams, people smiled, knowing that somewhere out there others were looking back at Earth, thinking the same thing. We made it through the dark, together.